Welcome to Whiskey Cast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 923 for February 9th, 2022, featuring our Happy Hour live webcast from the other night with Jeff Arnett of Company Distilling in Tennessee. Of course, Jeff is best known as the former master distiller at Jack Daniel's, and we talked about his time in Lynchburg, too. Thanks, as always, to Redbreast and Dewar's, the presenting sponsors of Whiskey Cast, for making our live webcasts possible each week, along with Scarabeus, Catoctin Creek, Mortlock, Sagamore Spirit, the Delmore, and Writer's Tears, the segment sponsors on our weekly Whiskey Cast podcast. I want to bring in Jeff Arnett, our pal from Company Distilling down in Tennessee. Jeff, how are you tonight?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on, Mark. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
Let's talk about Company. Brand new distilling project, and you guys are in the process of building out the original distillery in Townsend, Tennessee. Where is Townsend and why there?
Yeah. So, if you look at the group of people that have come together to form Company Distilling, we all worked at different distillers around Tennessee. And one of the few events that brought us together every year was a festival called Grains and Grits. And Townsend was the host location for it. It's they call it the peaceful side of the Smokies. So if you've been to the Smoky Mountains, a lot of people end up going to Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg. It can be a little bit of a rat race there. It doesn't feel very relaxing to a lot of people because of the traffic and congestion and things like that. And Townsend is the alternative to that. It's if you're going out to view wildlife out at Cades Cove, if you want to see bear and deer and the natural habitat and everything, most likely that's what's going to send you through Townsend because it's the best way to get to Cades Cove. But it's a beautiful location. We found property that was about a half a mile outside the park and the entrance into the national park. We're fortunate enough to get that. I got the little river running behind it. It's on the parkway, so got great visibility. So we picked up I want to say we got like 10 acres there, but 3 or so of it is on the other side of the river, would not be buildable, but a beautiful 7-acre plot. And the distillery is actually under construction now. So we've got roof trusses in. We should be under roof, a solid roof, rain tight roof in the next couple of weeks. And then walls will start going up. So we're still a few months out, and hopefully we'll have an announcement coming out in the next, weeks or maybe a month or so when we know exactly when we'll have our grand opening. But it should be sometime early summer, late spring.
The place that you guys took over was essentially an old river rafting site, right?
It was. Yeah, that's one of the things that Townsend is kind of known for, is for people who enjoy outdoor lifestyles, it has an awesome bike trail that goes the full length of the valley on both sides of the highway. It's very safe. If you just want to get some exercise, it's got easy access to some of the better hiking trails that are in the park. But you could also come over and there are companies that will give you an inner tube for the day and kind of take you upriver, drop you off, and just let you float through on the little rivers. Beautiful location that's literally just outside the national park. But there was a business there that was called Cowboy Tubing. So people who've come to Townsend before will probably know where it is. But we built a distillery kind of under the same drip line. This building was grandfathered in years ago, and we kind of re-envisioned what that building could be. We were trying to save the original building, actually. We were going to modify only one end of it to put a production area on it. And then after 3 structural assessments, we decided it was best. We really just need to take the building down and build it right. So we were hoping to be open last fall. It's going to be, a few more months, but we'll have a much better facility at the end of the day. And we're excited about it and how it's all come together. It'll actually be a combination, both a brewery and distillery. So the brewery will provide a beer into the still for like whiskey making purposes and things like that. We'll be able to make vodka and gin and some other products like that as well.
And you've got the second distillery already up and running in Thompson Station, right?
We do. It was H. Clark Distillery. So if people have taken the Tennessee Whiskey Trail or just toured some of the distilleries around Nashville, they may be familiar with him. He's right on the railroad tracks, about 30 minutes south of Nashville in a small town called Thompson Station. He won the Ascot Award for Best Gin. So even though he was also a bourbon maker and made great brown spirits, actually. When people came to visit him, I think most notably they left there saying, "This is some of the best gin I've ever had." And he's got an award to kind of prove that it really was that good. So, but Heath's been a friend of mine. I actually worked with two of his uncles at Jack Daniel's for 20 years. One was our chief engineer. The other one was a control system programmer. So I knew Heath through the guild and through his uncles, and he was a friend of mine. And then, of course, we were also friends with Chris Tatum from Old Forge Distillery. He served as president of the Tennessee Distillers Guild when I was vice president, and Heath was on the board. So we worked together for the betterment of the industry from three different distilleries, and enjoyed one another's company. Anytime we got a chance to be together, we found that we just had a even greater appreciation for one another and the skill sets that we had and how complementary they were, and that just led us into a conversation about, would we want to do this? Because I looked at Chris and Heath and said, I think that I could go out on my own and build a distillery, but I feel even better about those prospects if I had a couple of guys like you who have a complementary skill set to mine, because I feel like we're stronger together. They agreed, and that's kind of how the company Distilling was born.
And you've got money from the family behind Clayton Homes to put it all together, right?
We do. So that was another thing that was kind of fortuitous about coming to Grains and Grits is Kevin Clayton from Clayton Homes. His father and uncle founded that company about 60 years ago. It's part of Berkshire Hathaway now. He's CEO. He is interested in and has a vision for what could be done in East Tennessee and specifically around Townsend. So in addition to helping us as company Distilling with financing and also just some great leadership that he has and getting us to get our best ideas together, he owns the Little Arrow Campground, which is USA Today had just voted it the best glamping resort in the USA. And that wasn't the case, 4 or 5 years ago when he first bought it. That was just his vision of making it better and better each year. But he actually bought the local tubing business. He's upgraded the equipment there at River Rats and decided to go ahead and build a mountain biking park. That was one of the things that he had gone over to Bentonville, Arkansas, where the Walmart family, Waltons, had decided to create something in Bentonville that would be, other than coming to visit Walmart, would give you a reason to come to Bentonville and to create a tourist destination. So they constructed a mountain biking park over there. He and his nephew, Corey, who's part of our group, had gone over and seen what they had done and began to plan that for Townsend. So they have I think it's 13, 14 miles is where it landed, but it's a world-class mountain biking track that's in the Smoky Mountains here now. That's called V Hollow. So we're just one of many attractions that are coming to Townsend, world-class campgrounds, mountain biking parks, tubing, opportunity after, all your activities are over with to come over and grab a cocktail or a bottle, take it back to the campground, enjoy your friends, make some memories together. We're just happy to be a part of all that's going on in Townsend right now.
And the project in Alcoa, that's still a little ways away, right?
It is. We recognize, even though we love Townsend, it has a huge traffic count. It's a great tourist corridor. It's a beautiful piece of property. We kind of knew that we were not going to be able to do all of our manufacturing there. There is no sewer system. There's no natural gas. So everything we do there literally has to be done on electricity and a septic tank. So we had to be very smart in our design manufacturing wise. Alcoa is over a 30-acre property located right on the side of the Pistol Creek. So a lot of people don't know where Alcoa is, but it's literally right across the street from the Knoxville airport. So if you've heard of Knoxville, Maryville, Alcoa, it's kind of all merges together at the airport. So Alcoa, of course, the city of Alcoa is named after the company. They literally built the town. The Aluminum Company of America was founded there. They took advantage of all the rivers and streams and the ability to create hydropower because the manufacturing of aluminum takes a lot of electricity to accomplish. So they chose Alcoa because of all the abundant flowing rivers and stuff because they could generate power from them. But we're actually on a property that was owned by Alcoa. They manufactured brick there. So the old brick plant is still standing. It's about 25,000 square foot building. It has the brick kiln. Drying ovens are still largely intact. It needs a little bit of structural work, but our intention is to take the old brick plant and turn it into our barrel warehouse. It has a fairly watertight roof, and it's got to be one of the oldest buildings in Alcoa. And Alcoa it's kind of ironic, was actually founded in 1919, the same year as National Prohibition. So, we feel like Alcoa, it's kind of funny that we would locate a bourbon, distillery there. Of course, we're going to make Tennessee whiskey too, but we're starting off with bourbon. I've always been a fan of bourbon, so I'm going to do a version of Tennessee whiskey when we get to that point. But we're just excited that we've got this historic old property. It's a beautiful piece of property, and it's within eyeshot pretty much of the airport from Knoxville. So if you're kind of going in or out of the Knoxville airport, you look, left or right based on which direction you're coming from, and you'll be able to see us.
I love that description. Fairly watertight on the roof.
Fairly watertight. I mean, considering the building's 100 years old, it was actually, when I saw the structural list of what needed to be done to it, it was shorter than I thought it was going to be. Because we had actually considered doing everything under that roof, trying to put the distillery, maybe doing a restaurant in it. I'm not sure I would want to take it to that point, but if all we need to do is be able to secure barrels in there with working lights and a sprinkler system and a decent floor to roll barrels in and out, that we're not very far away from that, even though the building needs some work.
First of all, the most important question I haven't asked you yet. What's in your glass tonight? What are you drinking?
Actually, I have a Diet Coke from Weigel's.
Okay.
So I haven't. I'm actually at our warehouse right now in Maryville. So I'll have one when I get back to the house. I've been drinking company. I've really. One of the great things about this industry is you don't mind taking your work home with you. And I always felt that way about Jack Daniels. Anything we were working on at the time, if it was a new product, Tennessee Tasters line, the rye, the Sinatra, the Gold, all those things that were fairly new in the portfolio during my time there. I love the opportunity to take them home and kind of put them through the paces, drink them neat, chill the bottle, put in a whiskey stone, add a rock, make a cocktail. Just to make sure that I'm happy that the product didn't need to be nipped or tucked somewhere. But we're off to a great start with company. It was, considering it's pretty tough. I don't mind telling you, when we went out because as a new brand you got to source. Nobody walks in with a warehouse full of barrels unless they're joining another company. So we didn't have the blessing of having barrels at our disposal. We had to find some that we could make something we felt like was unique. And I, on the surface, I didn't think anything that was readily available, was ready. So it took us quite a bit of time to sort through what we wanted to do before we ultimately came up with the three liquids that are a part of the company bourbon recipe. I was pretty solid on what I wanted to do on the finishing side. I had done that 27 Gold using toasted maple. I knew the benefits of toasted maple wood. I didn't want to relive the loss that comes from a second barreling in maple, because maple wood is not as high integrity as oak when it comes to the bleed rate, and the angel shares are massive in them. But so I knew coming into this that I was going to work toasted maple primarily, even though we're going to work with a lot of different toasted woods, charred woods as part of the brand's DNA. That's what we want to explore. And that's one of the great things about being in the Smoky Mountains area. Just outside the door of the Townsend Distillery are 150 hardwood species. So it's got one of the most biodiverse tree populations in the country right outside our door. Not all of them are going to be appropriate for wood finishing, but I've worked with hickory, with cherry wood, apple wood, pecan wood. There's a lot of woods that all have unique characteristics of flavor that I think, based on what kind of grain character you have, the distillate character, you can kind of pair them up for more synergistic combinations of flavor. So we went, of course, with wheated. So there's no rye in the company bourbon. That was something, I kind of wanted to get out of the lane of Jack Daniels. I was very grateful to be at Jack Daniels for almost 20 years and serve as their master distiller. But in all that time, we were pretty much doing a really high corn recipe. We went to a high rye recipe, but I'd never worked with wheat. And I like the idea of wheat because it was I view them as being approachable. Not everybody likes wheated bourbons because for some people they're a little soft. They prefer rye character. They like the peppery spiciness, the boldness that comes from that grain. But I wanted maple to be the feature. of what we did with the company distilling bourbon in particular. So the wheat kind of gave me a nice introductory liquid to start the process with. But Tennessee tasters, we had worked with Jamaican pimento wood. We did the hickory one that almost had like bacon. I mean, it was unbelievable. Yeah. When you put the charred hickory wood into the process to finish on it. I was like, it was like, hey, that's Jack Daniels, and all of a sudden it's like, that's bacon. I mean, where'd that come from? I mean, the woods are pretty pronounced if you prepare them properly. So I'm just having a good time, to be quite honest. I enjoy the freedom that comes from not being told no. I have a few guys that trust me, and I'll kind of throw some ideas out there at them, and it's like, hey, that intrigues me, and then I'll build some models. We'll taste them. If we like them, we'll pursue them. So it's been fun to be able to do that.
Now, the question I have for you, we have one from Graham Frazier, who wants to know, what all does it take to build a new distillery? And the question is more specifically, just a second here, I want to scroll up and get it right. How strict are the local and state authority rules in setting up a new distillery? What did you have to go through in Townsend, for instance?
A lot of your permitting and things for a distillery are federal. So we try to be very respectful to the local planning commission of Townsend and letting them know that we were going to, take the old tubing business and we were going to redo that into a distillery. We did not have to get their approval at a local level. So the building was already zoned properly. We could get federal permits, state permits without having any local support at all. But we also understood that that's not a smart way to go about business. So we wanted to come in and let people know who we were. If they had concerns, if there were things that we could change about the plan that would make it better for the community, we wanted to hear them out and make sure that we kind of factored that in. So, of course, I think anytime we're in the buckle of the Bible Belt in Tennessee, you're always going to have people who have some pretty strong opinions about alcohol. So you have to be a little bit prepared for that, for a little bit of public commentary and blowback. What we have shown in the state of Tennessee, the Tennessee Distillers Guild, we all came together and said, let's not be a problem for ourselves and let's not be a problem for one another. We told ourselves to higher standards than what the laws require. We self-imposed serving restrictions through our tastings. There was a year that we kind of did all the metrics on it. Between all the distilleries that were part of the Tennessee Distillers Guild, we did like 18 million tastings. We only had 6 violations cited over 18 million tastings. That is a much better track record than what you get at a typical liquor by the drink establishment, like a bar or restaurant. We usually have a much higher incident rate than that. But I think what you'll find is that, of course, when your livelihood depends upon it, you don't push those boundaries very much. I mean, we take it very serious. We don't want to overserve. We don't want to serve underage people. So, but we found that it was pretty easy actually. Once we had a property that was owned properly, that you go to state and federal, get your permits, and then you're rolling. It's still a time-consuming process. It can be very expensive. If you just look at who's come on at Company Distilling, as I was saying earlier, I felt confident that I brought a skill set that could make a new distillery venture successful. I learned a lot at Jack Daniels, and a lot of those skills are transferable into a new brand. And I don't have to do exactly what Jack did, but I just learned a lot. And a couple of things that I learned is that I didn't want to have to do everything that is required to run a distillery. So it takes a lot of, you need a lot of legal advice and application filling out. Heath is, besides being a talented gin maker, he's also a lawyer. He helped to overturn the laws that were preventing new distilleries from coming into the state of Tennessee. That's why there were only 3 distilleries in the state of Tennessee forever. That's because it was illegal to distill outside of just a few counties. Now you can, 2/3, almost 3/4 of the state counties now, it's legal to open up a distillery in. But you need somebody who can just do the general management and construction piece of it. Chris Tatum, who's another one of my partners, came from Old Forge, and he had actually built not just their distillery, but several others because they had a construction company in East Tennessee that was going and helping other distilleries get built. So, I think, if you can assemble a team that you've got construction experience, you've got some legal background, you've got some production talent, you've got financial backing. We talked about the importance of having that. We couldn't have asked for a better partner than Kevin Clayton. Like I said, it takes more than money. It takes vision, I think, and patience, because even though I think this is a great industry to be in, and it can be very rewarding, it takes time. We're pretty heavily invested in just to get our first bottle on the shelf. So it's not for the faint of heart. You're going to have to be kind of sure of yourself, and you're going to have to be patient to do it.
I never did say what I was drinking tonight, and I'm actually sipping on a corn whiskey from our friends at High Wire.
Okay.
In Charleston. They're Benton's smoked Jimmy Red corn whiskey, made with the legendary Jimmy Red corn that was used by the bootleggers in the Charleston area for generations. And they smoked this. They worked with the folks at Benson's Country Hams in Madisonville, Tennessee. So there is a Tennessee connection here.
Okay.
To get the smoking into this one, just because it's one of those nasty, chilly, cold, rainy days, and a smoky whiskey just sounds really good.
Yeah. Did they disclose the grain bill on it? I mean, a corn whiskey's got to be at least 80% corn, and it can't go in a new barrel. Can't go through charcoal mellowing either.
Yeah, nope. It's they do not say, but I suspect it's 100% Jimmy Red corn.
Okay.
Because they use only the Jimmy Red in this one, so I don't think they used. So I think it's 100% Jimmy Red.
All right. Maybe
Scott Blackwell or Ann Marshall are watching, and they'll jump in the chat area here.
Okay.
And answer that for us. But just a nice little smoky whiskey on a cold, rainy Friday afternoon. Kind of goes down really well. Interesting question.
I don't want to steal the thunder that Jack Daniel's has coming, but we actually had partnered with some local farmers there in Moore County to do an old heirloom crop of corn to produce a corn whiskey. So I'm not sure what their plans are. When I left, of course, I had Chris Fletcher as my right hand there for about 6 years. So I didn't really have to do a whole lot of downloading of information because he was a part of a lot of those decisions. So, it's in his very capable hands now, and I'm sure he will do great things with it. But I really like a high corn, really sweet drink. To me, they're just easy. And there's something to be said for that. You don't always want something to punch. Sometimes you want the punch in the face, but sometimes you don't. And to me, corn, if you do it right, it can be a really easy, soft, drinkable spirit.
We have an interesting question from Christopher Malloy. Is there a whiskey bubble in the marketplace? I can't sort through all of the new brands out there. You're entering the market. Is this a good time to enter the market with a new brand?
I'm in the industry, and I can't sort through all the new brands either. I'm as surprised as everyone else that, everybody seems to be getting in right now. I can't say that it was a good time or a bad time to get in, but only time will tell. But I do think there's way more labels of whiskey out there than there are unique liquids to try. You have a handful of players that supply a lot of the new brands. That was one of the challenges that we had, and actually one of the temptations that we were going to have to overcome is that it would have been easy for us to go to the big players and just grab up what they offer. And be like a lot of the other brands, but we were like, we need to be better than that. We can be better than that. So as we were designing what went into company, we did not necessarily just stay with the usual suspects. We actually ended up in 3 different states with 3 different liquids that all had different grain bills and characteristics that I was looking for components of character that I could put together to make a more complex and more balanced spirit out of them. My background before coming to Jack Daniel's, I came there back in 2001 as the quality control manager, and I was in that role for about 7 years before they named me master distiller. But prior to that, my first job out of college was at a coffee company, and I began to learn the sensory sciences in coffee, where you were tasting individual coffee beans that came from different countries and different growing regions and altitudes and different varieties, from Arabica beans to Robustas, and the benefits of each. I found that sometimes the best mouthfeel in coffee would come from like a Robusta bean, but the flavor of them alone was kind of like licking the bottom of a shoe. They were very earthy, and by themselves, you wouldn't want them to necessarily be the full drivers of flavor. So you would kind of work in more the brights, the highly acidics. I thought more pleasing flavor the Arabica type beans, but together you could work them into a package. And coffee it's not like corn where you can harvest it and dry it and put it in a silo and it'll last a year because you got a pericarp that kind of protects all the starches. And as long as you don't damage that, you can store it for quite a while. Coffee is like in a shell. And when you split that shell to express the bean out of it, you got to do something to it. I mean, it's degrading quickly. So you needed to roast it, grind it, put it in a can, jar, bag, do something, but it's not going to sit around very well. So you couldn't buy enough of a particular variety of coffee to go the entire 365 days of the year. So you were constantly having to evaluate beans and replace them in your formulation. So you were kind of, and I'm kind of going to be in that same mode. I've told people have asked me what 3 states are involved in your liquids right now. And I'm like, well, I could tell you, but, we're actually looking at a 4th state right now. Their grain bill is right. The character is right. So we may flex up to 4 states on the next round, or we may stay at 3 and just kick another state out. So it's just, that's going to be the nature of us. But, we're in a new make contract. We went and hand selected a grain bill and a barrel. A good friend of mine that made barrels for me at Jack Daniels is now the operator of Speyside Cooperage up in Ohio. And, he used some proprietary toast and char type techniques that I was used to having at Jack Daniels. That was one of the things that was always, I think, a strength of Jack Daniels is that the barrel, they invested very much in the barrel, had their own barrel making cooperages where they could control, the barrel's all your color. It's over half your flavor. So the more you can control that part of your process and not commoditize it and have to constantly change from manufacturer to manufacturer, the more stable, more consistent your product's going to be. And that was a strength for Jack Daniels. And I understood that and wanted to be able to replicate that with company as best I could. So I kind of, before I even selected a liquid or the liquids that became a part of company, I was already at the cooperage, talking to Darren at Speyside saying, can you make me this type of barrel? And if whoever I end up working with, will you support me and will you make a specific barrel for me? And of course, we're up there shaking hands and talking. And next thing we know, that kind of spins off into a conversation with a company that he knows that had excess capacity and was willing to be a startup partner for us. So it just kind of, it was almost like we started with what we wanted to be years from now. And then we backed up into what's the closest we can get to that today. I think people have loved the first offering from company. I will tell you a few years down the road, I think it's going to be even better. And I know that's a lot to promise, but I truly believe I'm doing the best I can with what I can get right now. But what we're laying down for ourselves and the barrel that we're laying it down in is beautiful. It's just, my life's going to be much, much easier when I get to that point. And then ultimately, of course, when Alcoa opens, having, not to be dependent upon anyone to support us at that point.
I was talking with someone from Tennessee earlier today and who's well connected in the industry. I'm not going to mention names, but told them that I was going to be talking with you. And they said that they had never seen you more relaxed, more relaxed now than they'd ever seen you before. They'd never seen you happier. And it seems like you are happier.
And I do think I know who you talked to because that person told me the same thing. And I never thought that I was that uptight when I was with Jack Daniels, but I also understood the weight of the title that I had, that I couldn't really speak for myself. Even when I was speaking for myself, ultimately that would be interpreted as me speaking for the brand. So you kind of didn't always say, what you thought. And so you were kind of maybe slightly on edge for that reason. Because I never wanted to say anything that would hurt Jack Daniels. And in the world we live in, it doesn't really matter what you say. You're going to upset about half the people, right? That's what we're learning is that I would love to get us back to a point where we talked again and found that we have more in common than we do differences. We're hoping that our brand could be a catalyst for that, just for conversations again. That was, we've talked about that, a good spirit can bring people together and hopefully in a way that, kind of heals and creates unity, which I think
I need you to explain the reason behind the name Company Distilling, though, because a lot of folks, particularly our listeners and viewers outside of the U.S., may not quite get this. So please explain the rationale behind it.
Yeah. So, Actually, the origin of the word company is not the business entity that we all think of today. Right now, when you think of company, you think of an employer, a place you work. But originally, company was the people you break bread with. It was sort of like your circle of friends. And I can remember this much more from the time that I was a kid. My mom, would tell me, please go clean up your room. We have company coming over. And these were people that weren't always our family members, but they were people that we cared about. They were people who were important to us, so the people that we wanted to give our best effort to, that were worth giving our best. And that's really where the company name came from. We want people to gather around. We want to celebrate friendships and the people in our lives that make us better. I think that's one of the things that came out of the pandemic for a lot of people is that, a lot of us felt isolated. We didn't know if getting together with people was smart, if it was reckless. I think hopefully we're getting near the end of that, where we feel like this last variant that's coming through might be the end of this. And we're just going to have to, it looks like, live with it. It's just going to become a part. It'll be like the flu, and hopefully it won't be near as stinging or as deadly as we go forward. But I think the opportunity to gather again with people that matter to us is something that we shouldn't take for granted. It's something we should celebrate. We feel like we wanted to create a product that brought people together. And if you look at the design of the liquid, let me talk a little bit about that. Whiskeys can be anything from 80 proof up to 140 plus. They can be everything from soft and sweet to bold and spicy, or, somewhere in the middle. If you ask someone what the perfect whiskey is, some people want the soft and sweet 80 proof. Some people want the high rye 140s. And, I would say that neither of them is wrong. All they're expressing is an opinion or a preference about what they like. But to me, the challenge with a whiskey, if you're only going to have one, is can you bridge the gap, right? Can you find that one thing that a novice, someone who's new to whiskey drinking, who might be a little bit overwhelmed by higher proofs or really super spicy grain mixes, and someone who's a very mature palate, somebody who's kind of moved on from some of those softer, sweeter ones that are going for, a little bit more bolder expressions, I would call them. Can you find that one thing that bridges them? And that's what we hope company would be. When I went at 90 proof, I went with wheat, I went with maple, because I felt like it could be approachable, but it could also be complex at the same time. And I'm hoping that when people try it, that's what they would agree that it is.
Well, we have some company watching from Brisbane, Australia tonight, Chris and Lilith, and they said to say hello. They've met you both down in Brisbane and in Tennessee, and Lilith had her second round of chemo yesterday. She's fighting breast cancer, and we want to wish her well.
Prayers for her. Stay strong.
Yep, absolutely, as we've said before. And
that was one of the great things about being with Jack Daniel's. I was on the road for about 12 years with them and went to, I think, 41 countries. I tried to go back when I had to update my passport and look at the stamps and remember all the trips and all the stops along the way. But I was able to go to Australia. I only went one time, but I was there for about 8 or 9 days, and it was a wonderful country. Love the people there. Great sense of humor. Of course, anytime I was in a country where they spoke English, even if it was sometimes a challenge, like in Scotland, that's supposedly English too. But I was kind of like, what did you say? But Australians, I found them to be just delightful people. A lot of fun. Huge Jack Daniel's fans down there. I mean, probably some of the best that I had met in 41 countries I was able to visit. But I actually spent the day today with a guy from Scotland. So I was, the whole Scotland thing's kind of in my head. But I
folks in Jack Daniel
of English and how to understand them along the way.
And the folks in Australia are big fans of Jack Daniel's, despite the fact that they got a weaker version than everybody else in the world, right?
Yeah, Australia is the only country in the world that has a standard whiskey definition that is different than what the globe says. In every other country, a whiskey has got to be at least 80 proof in the bottle, and there it can be 74. And if you're anything above the standard good in Australia, you pay a luxury tax. So they view anybody who's 80 proof or up, that's in the luxury range. So you basically incur luxury taxes. So a bottle of Jack Daniel's, 80 proof, 700 ml bottle was when that bottle was selling for maybe $20 or $25 in most of the U.S., it was about 50 down there. So on the exchange and everything. So very expensive, but you could get much more competitive if you just went to it was a slightly younger product. It was 74 proof. So a little lighter character. If somebody's a Jack and Coke drinker, I would just say that it would get it done. And it was a little bit more affordable for people. So yeah, it was a white label 1907 edition, we called it. We actually replicated a label that we had a reference from that had been used by Jack Daniel years ago. At the time that we were launching that product. So, and you saw some of the legacy labels that came out from Jack Daniels. There was a black one, sort of an olive green one. All of those are actually replicas of labels that had been used previously at the distillery.
They used a replica of the old 18-year-old for the new 10-year-old release that came out last fall.
They did.
That you were involved with.
Yeah, it had been a long time since Jack Daniel had used an age statement. We had bottles in our display cabinets there that dated back into the 40s and 50s. And they would say, this whiskey is 5 years old. This whiskey is 7 years old. This whiskey is 8 years old. So anytime the age changed, they actually communicated that on the label with a label change. So Jack Daniels had gotten away from that over the years. And I think part of that was, becoming a global brand and going into the Scotch space. If you're aged, 4, 5, 6 years, that's really in the Scotch world, that's nothing to brag about, right? If you're selling on age, but the processes and the climates were so different. It was just like, let's not even put that on there. So, I kind of go back and forth. I can tell you that age is not maturity. I know there's always going to be arguments about that fact, but I was evaluating liquids. Some that were in the 3 to 4 year range that were far more mature than some of the liquids I was trying that were 6 and 7. They had more color and more character. They had been in obviously warmer climates. They had lower entry proofs, which I think actually helps mature the spirit along a little bit as well. So, you can't just look at an age statement and know what you're going to get. I think an age statement might give you an expectation of character, but sometimes you can be surprised. I've tried some really old products that had age dates on it that were fairly substantial that I thought still weren't ready. That still were a little, what I would have described as a little bit sawdust and green, a little celery type in character. Then I've tried some fairly young spirits that I was just like overwhelmed. I'm like, wow, I mean, that's really polished, really complex, really good. So, I had to kind of throw that out the window. I really wanted to avoid an age statement on our product. We went ahead and carried one. Actually, the most mature product that I was using was just shy of 4. It was, I think our first batch was everywhere from 3 years, 10 months up to 5 years. If you were just looking at the ages of the barrels. But ultimately, I was just looking for that right setup for the toasted maple to do the real signature work of our first product. And I think that's when, if you taste this company bourbon, the wheat's the maple's very prominent on it.
We have a great comment from Bill Monteith. I always remember my mother keeping cake around that none of us could ever have. If we asked, Mom would say, that's for company.
Yeah.
Hopefully Mom replaced that cake every once in a while.
Gather around great company. I've been very fortunate to have great people around me. I felt like I had that at Jack Daniels. I couldn't have asked for a much more supportive cast of people. They love that brand. The people of Lynchburg, they're just very hospitable. They didn't have to embrace me. I wasn't from Lynchburg. I was a native Tennessean, but I moved in from West Tennessee and had left Procter & Gamble to come to them. But they, when I was announced as master distiller, they couldn't have been much more supportive of me. They got behind me. They gave me a great effort, and I'll be eternally grateful for it. And it sets a standard for us. We've talked about it as a group of people. We're still pretty small. We're getting those critical skilled people in place right now, but we're about to go on our hiring spree. We've got facilities to open, and trying to figure out who we are as a company, what we value, the behaviors we want to see. I think hospitality is a gift, regardless of how smart someone is. We want people who greet people who are warm, and make them feel welcome anytime they come to our facilities. And we'll teach you how to make a great product if you don't already know how to. We've got the collective talent in our group to do that. I was lucky. Besides myself coming from Jack Daniel's, I was able to bring the microbiologist that had worked with me at Jack Daniel's for about 20 years, and he was literally. I slept well at night. There were certain things that tend to go on at almost all distilleries that never happen at Jack Daniel's, and a lot of it had to do with his attention to detail and his skill. He cared for a proprietary yeast culture. He knows how to create additional proprietary yeast cultures. We have a plan to actually create a product that truly has the flavor of East Tennessee off of a proprietary yeast culture that we're going to collect from the area and then pilot that through some fermentation work to figure out exactly how to develop it. So, we're going to, from a technological standpoint, we're going to be, for a new company, for a small company, I think we'll be probably going to be seen as pioneers in the near future, just simply because we're going to take on some work that a lot of the small distillers wouldn't dare try to. But there's 3-4 of us that come into this venture, and between us, we have about 65 years of distilling experience. So we plan to take full advantage of that.
We have another great question from Graham Fraser in Scotland, by the way. What was your proudest achievement whilst at Jack Daniel's?
Oh, that's a good one. I was lucky to be master distiller at a time when brown spirits really just exploded again. When I became master distiller there, they had Old No. 7 Tennessee whiskey, the traditional black label, and they had Gentleman Jack and Single Barrel. So from those three products, the portfolio of Jack Daniel's blew open to 11 products. First new grain bill since Prohibition with the rye. I know not everybody's a fan of flavors, but the honey, the fire, and apple, they were all products that brought new people to Jack Daniel's. I always say putting another rung on the ladder for people to grab. But the Sinatra and Gold products that came out where we were working on barrel technologies and wood primarily, I felt like we did a very well-rounded expansion of the portfolio of Jack Daniel's using between flavors and grains and barrels. It looks like it's a singular award, but being named Master Distiller of the Year back in 2017, I hung that proudly on my wall, but I always accepted it as a team award, that was a lot of people's efforts being recognized, and I was just the guy that got the credit for it. But when the Heritage Barrel, I'd say when it came out and was the number 3 whiskey, when Whiskey Advocate did their ratings, Jack Daniel's had not been in a top 10, top 20 category in a long, long time, if ever. So beginning to see Jack Daniel's, I think, get some of the respect in some of the awards categories that had, long been left out of, was probably one of the things I was proudest of. I think the Heritage Barrel was I had the guy that was the brand director for Jack Daniel's just kind of came to me and said, "Hey, the 150th anniversary of Jack Daniel's is coming up in a few years. We've got time to lay down something unique and different. Just what do you want to do?" So I just, I did. I laid down what I thought would have been a whiskey from years ago, where we didn't char the barrels as much. They were more toasted than charred. I dropped entry proof. I raised bottle proof. I didn't really change anything, but what it showed is that some of those things that maybe have changed over the years for financial reasons or whatever haven't all been ideal, if we're being honest. I told the CEO, because he tasted the product and he said, "That's some of the best Jack Daniel's I've ever had in my life. What did you do?" And I said, "Well, what I did is what we would do with every single barrel if finances made no difference. If I was willing to give up 25% utility on every barrel, spend 3 times longer toasting every barrel out of the coop. If I'd cut your cooperage capacity into a third of what it is today and raise your barrel cost 25-30% because I'm not using it as much because I'm lowering the proof on it. And by the way, I'm going to raise your bottle proof too, so your net out of every barrel is going to be less." So, you put all of that stuff together, it's phenomenal, but it's expensive at the same time, especially if you're looking at it over, a 10 million case brand. But
what was it?
He understood exactly what I was saying. he was a great supporter of mine. His name was Paul Varga. He was the CEO there for most of my tenure and time at Jack Daniel's. He was a chief marketing officer. He had come out of, he had the Southern Comfort brand for a while and ultimately became CEO. But, I thought he was visionary. He was a strong leader for the company. In his estimation, he felt like proof and age were not that important to a lot of consumers. And you could argue whether that's true or not. But I think that you saw that reflected in the Jack Daniel's brand for a long time, that we weren't playing age games. We really weren't valuing proof as much maybe as we should. And I think one thing you'll find from Chris is that I think he completely understands that. That's Chris Fletcher, who took my place. When he came in, he immediately was saying, we're making a mistake if we don't think about higher proofs and age statements and things of that nature. And Chris had worked for Brown-Forman in R&D. He spent some time with Buffalo Trace before I was able to kind of recruit him back into the Jack Daniel's family and as an assistant for me. And he was a great sounding board. All of my spirits experience was at Jack Daniel's, but he had been able to work with a lot of different spirits types in R&D for Brown-Forman. The time at Buffalo Trace, I think, kind of allowed him behind the curtain to see the wizard. He kind of had that moment where he's like, "Hey, I can kind of tell you, what's going on there." We weren't telling it to the people in the public, but it kind of gave us some insight on the story, and then maybe if the story's not completely fleshed in, what the truth is behind it. So, but no, Chris was great, and that was actually one of the things that helped me make the decision to leave Jack Daniel's. Is I wouldn't have left them if I felt like I was leaving them high and dry. But Chris was ready. He was kind of waiting for me to retire, and I wasn't at retirement age yet. But I was like, I can go on and do my own thing. It's a win-win. It gives Chris the promotion that he has earned, and it gives me a chance to do something that I probably wouldn't do otherwise. And that's just to trust myself enough to start a brand and a distillery.
We have a question from Chris down in Australia. They're lucky to finally have the barrel strength Jack Daniel's down there. He wants to know your thoughts on how people are now, quote, proof hounds compared to 10 years ago, where they want the highest proof they can get their hands on.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the one that just came out at Jack Daniel's, I was used to seeing exit proofs in single barrel from almost any warehouse. They were going to range anywhere from like 127 to 135. That was pretty typical based on how the summers and seasons had influenced the whiskey, but it was always pretty high. The 125 entry proof, it was just going up from there on these top floors. But that Coy Hill stuff I've seen bottles that came out of Jack Daniel's in the last month or so that were like 142, 143 hazmat. They call them hazmat bottles because anything above 140 proof has to carry a special placard if you tanker it or ship it. So, I'm actually a fan of high proof whiskey. It may not be for everyone, but what I love about it is the unadulterated spirit. It's the purest form of the product. When I was leaving Jack Daniel's, they certainly didn't have to do it, but they were nice enough to do it. They offered me to take a barrel of whatever I wanted as a departing gift, just to thank me for my time there. And I went to that 10-year-old inventory because it was already aging in. By the time I left, it was already 10 years old. It had turned 10 in September of 2020, and I was leaving in October. So I had that bottled in December. It turned out to be like 135.6. It's a 10-year-old single barrel proof that was my private stock. And I love it. What I love about it is, I can drink it neat. It's obviously going to be a little heat on that one. You can put an ice cube in it and just kind of let it dilute it down, let it work it back. I always say a whiskey kind of changes character as the proof changes. So the higher you start the proof, if you can just put like a big ice cube in it and just slowly dilute it down, it's almost like an onion peeling its layers back for you. It's like every sip is changing as you work your way down. But, a lot of times I'll pour a glass of this cask strength 135 proof, and I might, cut it a third with water, so I can make it a 90 proof if I want it to be. But that's what I like about it. There was no decision made at the distillery that influences what I can do with it. It's given me as a consumer the decision. I've got full control over the decision of how I'm going to drink it. It doesn't have to be full strength, but you can start there if you want to. Once you're down to 80 proof, you can't go back. right? So that's why I think, and to me, I thought for Jack Daniels, it was a real strength point for them. At 130 proof, I was like, I had stacked it up against a lot of cast strength products from other companies that might be 115 to 120 range. A lot of them weren't in the 130s. But I was like, it took me 5 years, actually. I suggested to our brand team that we offer a barrel proof single barrel, and there was reluctance to do it at the time. So it was a conversation that kind of went back and forth for a good 4 or 5 years before we finally pulled the trigger on it. But I called it the Distillers Privilege. Because I was one of a handful of people that had the right. I could just grab a drill and a glass and go up in a warehouse on a lot that we were considering to bottle for single barrel and try the product that way. And a lot of people don't get that opportunity. But, if we could put that in a bottle and give people that opportunity to try the purest form of the spirit at home, that seemed like a good idea to me. And ultimately, of course, I think we all came to agree. It was one of the best reviewed products while I was there. I didn't list that as my chief accomplishment or anything, but it was probably one of the products that I had to fight the most for at the time, because like I said, there were dynamics going on the brand team where there was some reluctance against high proof at the time to release that.
It's a plus now when you are the brand team as well as the distiller, right?
Yeah, well, one of the things, of course, I went and did some of the early sell-in to the state of Tennessee. I worked Middle Tennessee on some of the better stores there. And one of the first things I got from people was, are you going to have a cast strength? Because if you do, we're in. And I'm looking around their store, and they already have done some, cast strength, full barrel purchases from some other brands. So I see that as an opportunity. So yeah, it's been great. Some of it's not real practical for us to do right now. I'm just, waiting to get our first facility in East Tennessee open. You would not believe how difficult it was to find glassware and to get labels done. And, the supply chain has definitely got a hangover of the pandemic, and it's not out of it yet. And things are slow and expensive to get your hands on. But, I'm hoping that those things will ease up over the course of the next year, and we want to be playful. We met, our whole team was meeting earlier this week, and I brought out 2-3 different, I guess, potential future products that we could put out from company just to get everyone's opinion on them. And I mean, I think we all agreed. It's like, man, if we had glassware and labels right now, we would do them all right now. We loved them all. But we may have to make a choice and say, what do we think of those that we try? There's 3 new ones out there, which is our strongest to bring forward if we're going to have a second product in the portfolio for company. So, but yeah, I'm the product planner and I'm R&D, and we've laughed about it. It's like everybody's business card at company should say janitor and CEO. I mean, you pretty much whatever has to happen, you got to be prepared to do it. And I wouldn't ask anybody to do anything I'm not willing to do. So, we've had to fix up a warehouse. We had a warehouse lined up. The tenant didn't get out, got delayed. And it's like, well, they want to give us one that's an hour away. And I'm like, that's not cold. An hour out, an hour back is not good.
Afternoon here in New Jersey, a little bit of snow this morning. We are waiting for this big freaking storm to come.
You are not going to believe this, but the cat just turned on a podcast on the other computer.
Like, who is that?
That was the cat on the other computer, on my desktop computer, 10 feet away, was screwing around with the mouse pad and turned on the speakers. I don't believe it.
That's hysterical.
Give me 30 seconds because I gotta stop that nonsense right now.
Oh, there you go.
This is the culprit, Stave the Whiskey Kitten.
Yep.
A little chunk. You are an obnoxious little stinker. You turned a speaker on. You're not supposed to do that.
Yeah, my daughter, we got a cat. Unfortunately, we had a dog that we had for almost 10 years. He passed away in the last few months, but my daughter had been wanting a cat for a while. So we have a tuxedo, black and white cat. And he's a mouser now. I have to say, he leaves us presents inside the garage pretty much every morning. But But now, just kind of getting back to this, we're just trying to find warehouse space and how difficult that's been. I'm actually at our warehouse right now in East Tennessee, and we agreed to take it after a tenant left after 20 years. The place is pretty beat up. We needed to paint walls and replace flooring, but we were just like, we'll take it. It's close, it's in the right location, and we didn't want to see the window open and close and us not have it. So we just went ahead and agreed to take it as is.
And as John Kalinowski points out, the cat was just making a diversion to get to your whiskey stash.
Yep.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me, because this cat has actually knocked off a jar of cat treats off the shelf and pushed it over to the dog, knowing that the dog would chew the lid off of it.
There you go. Cats are smart.
Yeah.
They're really smart. My daughter, when she got this cat, we named him George because he was curious. That was the name that seemed to stick to him the best, but he kind of into everything.
Chris Tetsenko has the question. They're planning a trip from Kentucky down to Nashville when they get over. How far from Nashville is your distillery? And your distillery is going to be east of Knoxville, so it's going to be a bit of a haul, but how far is it from Nashville going to be? Yeah,
so we actually have H. Clark Distillery becomes company in early March, so we're going through rebranding, and if people want to try company bourbon, they can try it there, and it's only about 30 minutes south of Nashville. So near Franklin. So if you kind of head south out of Nashville, you go through Brentwood, Franklin, and then Thompson Station near Spring Hill, which is where the big GM, the old Saturn plant for GM, is located at Spring Hill. So it's not very far out from Nashville. But if you're trying to get to Townsend, you're probably staring down about a 3-hour drive to get over. I think it takes about 2 hours to get to Knoxville, and from Knoxville, you're looking at about maybe another 45 minutes, so maybe just under 3 hours. I live in Tullahoma still, so I'm about an hour and 15 minutes south of Nashville, about 15 minutes from Lynchburg is where my home still is. It takes me about 3.5 hours to get to Townsend, and I've done it a bunch. So I know. I think I bought a brand new truck about 9 months ago, and I'm 20,000 miles on it. So
how long is your drive home from the warehouse after you get done tonight with this?
Yeah, well, I'll be going to Townsend tonight. We're actually launching in Georgia next month. So I hadn't really gotten into that, but we're only distributed in Tennessee right now. We started out in November, but we're going into Georgia next week. So we're using Empire Distributing. So for people who live in Tennessee or Georgia, your Empire distributor if your store doesn't carry us, they can get it there within a day. Yeah.
So I want to close with one cheeky question, because I see the company distilling vest that you've got on.
Yep.
How much Jack Daniel's branded stuff do you still have at home, and how much of it did you have to get rid of when you started wearing the company stuff?
Yep. It was beyond clothing. I still have a Jack Daniel's golf cart that people private message me if you're interested in that. It's a 48-volt club car. But I had a pontoon that was all jacked up too. I mean, to the point that I couldn't unjack it. So one of the guys that's been a huge follower of Jack Daniel's and bought the Jack Daniel's Indian motorcycles, there's a collectible motorcycle that's been produced every year for the last 5 or 6 years. He's bought every single one of them. So he's done pretty well for himself. He's a commercial contractor, builds a lot of dairy, food type industry buildings. I offered it up to him, and he made me an offer I thought was reasonable. And he came from Wisconsin and got it. But to answer that question, to be honest, when I started taking everything out of my closet that had Jack Daniel's on it, there wasn't much left in my closet. Only my church clothes. That's about all I had. So I had like a suit and tie, but I had to go and buy clothes, honestly. But, I still have a lot of friends at Jack Daniel's, and I have people who are squires. I'm a squire. I'm still a fan of Jack Daniel's. I don't think that'll ever end. But, I try, now that I have my own brand, I try to be in my own brand as much as I can. But I had friends that about the same size as me who wanted the clothing. So I think I'm down to about half of what I originally had to offer. But I still have some Jack Daniel's clothing. If people like to wear an XL, I've got it for you. Lightly worn.
It's sort of like a college football coach that moves teams and changes schools and has to have a garage sale to get rid of all the branded stuff.
Yeah, I've got a man cave that looks like a jack cave as well. So, and some of that stuff, I'd never get rid of it. It was too much a part of my life and great memories for me as well. But I'm looking forward to the memories I'll make here. I've got a great team with me already. And I'm excited about what I think we're going to be able to do together. East Tennessee is beautiful. As much as I think Middle Tennessee is beautiful, East Tennessee may be even more so with the mountains and streams and everything that are here.
And Chris Tetsenko wants to get some company product sent down to Australia.
Hey, we've already had some requests like that. There's a guy down there that actually I think has a distribution license that's been contacting me. So that I think we're going to work on Tennessee and Georgia first, and then see where the dust settles from that, and then we'll look at what opportunities we have to distribute after that. But we definitely want to be a brand that's distributed as much as we can support. We've seen recently how brands who really got off to a hot start, and there was a lot of suction. People wanted the product, but it just it outran what they could do. They've been off the shelf for a while. And, I know sometimes that actually helps. The scarcity actually makes consumers even, more proud to have a bottle of what you got. But I just don't want to be the one who can't keep the shelf full. Once I commit to a state, I want to try to keep keep bottles on them as best I can to keep the following going.
Well, with that, we're going to close it out now because we've wasted an hour of everybody's time tonight.
Hopefully it wasn't a complete waste.
No. Yeah. But, Jeff, thank you for joining us. Best of luck with Company Distilling. The boss is down in Knoxville. As I said before we started, I'm going to make sure she grabs a bottle of Company before she heads home so that I can see what you guys are up to with this maple-finished bourbon. Thank you for doing this.
If you like it, make sure everybody knows. If you don't, private message.
You got it, Jeff. Hey, thanks for joining us, my friend. Take care of yourself and stay in touch.
Yep.
Once again, that's our Happy Hour Live webcast from Friday night, February 4th. Join us this Friday night when Maker's Mark Chairman Emeritus Bill Samuels Jr. will be my guest. And don't forget to listen to this week's Whiskey Cast. Chris Montana of Du Nord Craft Spirits in Minneapolis joins me to talk about the lessons he and his team learned as part of the Nearest and Jack Advancement Initiative. Thanks to our presenting sponsors, Dewar's and Redbreast, along with Writer's Tears, Scarabus, Mortlock, Sagamore Spirit, the Dalmore, and Catoctin Creek for their support of Whiskey Cast. Whiskey Cast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2022, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.